All right. So, hi everyone. We're back with another video for Gaeltacht Greenville, an Irish language group here based in Greenville, South Carolina. And this time I have Ciara Ní É with me, and just going to interview her and get her take on what she's doing with the Irish language and her background and views on it too. So Ciara, what is your background with Gaeilge?
Well, I wasn't raised with Irish, so before I say anything, I want to say thanks a million for having me.
You're welcome.
And I'm looking forward to this discussion. And it's great hearing about people learning Irish in other parts of the world. I spent a year teaching Irish on Fulbright in Villanova University in Philadelphia, and it was amazing. And I met a lot of Irish learners who were learning from different parts of America too, who had traveled to weekends. I taught for a weekend in Kansas City, and learned that that's not in Kansas State. And yeah, it was just, I just learned a lot about the different types of people who are learning Irish. So hello to everyone around the world who's learning Irish, and thanks for tuning in.
Yeah.
So my background with Gaeilge is, I wasn't raised with the language, so I'm sure people have some familiarity with what the situation is in Ireland, in that Irish is a minority language, but it's taught in schools from the age of 4 onwards. So I would have been taught Irish, and I was aware of its existence, of course, all around me on road signs, and in poetry and songs that would have been taught in music class and things like that. And my parents had a great respect for the language. Culturally, it would have been clear to me that learning Irish was something positive to do. So as I got older, I started kind of involving the language more in my life. And when I got to my leaving certificate, which is like your final year in high school, I just made the decision to study Irish and English in university, which was fantastic because it meant that I had, now that I'm a writer, I have kind of 2 strings to my bow. I can write in either language.
Yeah, that's really great. I'm working on trying to learn to write as Gaeilge, and I'm trying to read a lot more as Gaeilge. So yeah, that's helping me learn phrases that are useful for that sort of. There's just like these set phrases that any language has for like introducing new material and all of that. So I know I'm freezing a little bit, so hopefully everything can still be heard. My video's freezing, but tech difficulties. But yeah, so that's really great. So you've had lots of interactions with the media as Gaeilge as well. So can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, definitely. I've been involved. I had a campaign that I started, and I call it a campaign because it went on to win an award as the social media campaign of the year in 2018, which was amazing. But when I started it, I wasn't aware that it would grow as much as it did, because I'm very active on Twitter, and I would often kind of ask people to get involved in hashtags or start kind of small movements. Like I have a hashtag Filiocht na Mort, and I ask people, it just means poetry of a Tuesday. I ask people to share poetry, and that has been going on for years. So in 2018, which was Bliain na Gaeilge here in Ireland, the Year of Irish, which kind of just means, it's an excuse to focus on Irish, because every year is really the Year of Irish. But because of that, a lot of the media, and I mean the English-speaking media, were having these like special programs about the Irish language, where they would just like say, "Is the Irish language dead? Call in and give us your opinion." And then all these people who like don't speak Irish would say, "I think Irish is dead because I don't speak it." And it would just,
oh my goodness.
Yeah, very frustrating. And I was actually in the airport in Miami, and I wrote a tweet, like going back to Philadelphia. It was after the Christmas break. And I wrote a tweet. I just said, can we do a thing where we share things that people have said to us about Irish, but replace Irish with a different language? Because I find that when you do that, then people realize how ridiculous it is. So then people would say things, does your name have to be in Irish, or can I write it? Does your name have to be in Spanish, or do I have to write it, or can I not write it in English? Or oh, you Polish people always want to speak Polish around us. It's so rude. And these are things that people genuinely hear when you're an Irish speaker. So that was one really big interaction that I had with the media, because it was picked up nationally and internationally as well. So it was great, because it really showed me that you can make a difference, and you can, even if it's just your 15 minutes of airtime, you can actually maybe make people think differently.
Yeah, there's definitely a wide range of things that people say about minority languages that don't apply to majority languages. If you were to turn that around, it just sounds absolutely ridiculous.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's really cool. And in fact, I think we probably need like a dose of that, like at least once a year or something, because those same arguments keep coming back over and over again. And I guess it's just from people not realizing that it's around them and that it exists. They're just kind of in their own little either English or other languages bubble. So yeah.
And I find that a lot of the misunderstanding, or I'm going to call it because I'm going to be polite, misunderstanding is from monolingual speakers who don't understand that, other languages exist and are just as valid. So they might hear a word and say, that word's ridiculous. And you're like, well, no, actually the English one is ridiculous. It's based on the Greek, and they don't have any of that understanding. So usually it's based on ignorance.
Yeah, it usually is. Although I would hope, as international as we're getting now, especially with communication across nations, that will slowly diminish over time as people get exposed to other people's cultures and languages and things like that. So, yeah. So you are a writer. So being both a writer and a Gaeilgeoir probably is a little bit different than if you weren't a Gaeilgeoir as well. So what's your experience been with that?
I think it's been really positive. It definitely hasn't held me back in any way. It's definitely opened a lot of doors, because I think people are interested in Irish language. Well, I think certain people are, and then it means that they want to know what you're writing. They might be a little bit more curious than if it was just in English, because there's so many people writing just in English. So it probably has given me an edge, just in that, I run a spoken word night here in Dublin called Rec. And the only reason I really set that up is there wasn't a spoken word night in Irish. And I just had to, because I wanted me and the people that I admire to be able to come together, like these other performers, and perform together. So I had to set up this night. But, if I only wrote in English, I might not have ever set up a night. So there is the element, there is this kind of thing in anseo na Gaeilge, in the world of Irish and Irish speakers, that we have a real DIY attitude, and that, like, I'm going to set up the night, of course I will, or I'm going to protest that because of course I will. And we're all kind of looking out for each other and our rights, and we're always kind of activists. So I definitely think that being a Gaeilgeoir has made me be much more active in different ways. And yeah, it's amazing the difference it's made to my life.
Yeah, and part of that may be that sometimes there isn't that thing that you want out there already. And I know you probably hear this as a writer, is that when there's something you want to read that doesn't exist, someone needs to go write that. And a lot of times that's that person that wants to read the thing becomes the writer for that. And so in Irish, when there's not a lot of things that are available to, say, English speakers, it just gets created. Somebody picks that up and just says, hey, I'm going to do this thing, and creates it. That's kind of what happened to us here. There are groups up north, like you said, with Philadelphia and schools, but there really wasn't anything here in the Southeast. There's a little bit in North Carolina, but as far as South Carolina, there wasn't anything here. So we basically had to say, well, if we want something here, we've got to start making it.
Yeah.
So we got to do it.
Wow, that's it. You're true Gaeilgeoir.
Yeah, I guess so. Thank you. So what's the relationship with Ireland and poetry? Some of my viewers may not know that Irish has a very, very rich poetic history and puts a lot of emphasis and importance on poetry. So what do you know about that? What can you tell us about
I think it's really interesting because only when you are removed from your culture can you really realize what is normal, I suppose, and how unusual that is to another country. So I think Ireland in general as a nation, definitely we like poetry.
that?
A lot of the times it's poetry by dead men. So, but that is
Yeah.
changing. And we are kind of, I think, hopefully appreciating more poetry by living poets and poets of different genders. But historically, there was a really old system a long time ago where like poets had a really high standing in Irish society, and this is before
Yeah.
we were colonized. And they used to basically be like the right hand man to the Lord, and they'd be like his hype man, and they'd write all these poems like about how amazing he was. But as far as I understand it, people also believed that like the poets had power. So like if they wrote an amazing poem, like that was really good. But if they wrote a poem cursing you or wanting to do you harm, that was scary. So
Yeah.
I love that idea.
Yeah, and that goes along with something that I read about too, which was and it makes sense because if you think about a culture or a world where things weren't written down, or at least with words, things weren't created very often. And for someone to create something that will basically be passed down for generation to generation, especially poems, which are easier to remember in an oral tradition, basically that's your reputation for all those generations. How's history going to remember you, basically?
Yeah. And the poems themselves were amazing. They had like 70 million different rules. So like the poets would go away and learn for like 7 years, and like all the words in Dawn Dearach, Irish syllabic poetry, like the words, a lot of them have a relationship with another word in the poem, and like it's all laid out, and it's just like amazing. So to achieve this rhyme and alliteration, there was all this kind of system of using different metaphors and kind of names that stood in for things, and it was really detailed. But then after a while that system fell, and it's no longer like what is happening in Ireland or anything like that. But I think Irish people still do, specifically Irish speakers in Ireland, still do hold an appreciation for poetry, and it's not unusual for people to write a poem and share it, especially for a special occasion. And I only realized I am working on a project with a Welsh poet and a Scots Gaelic poet. And we were in Berlin, and we were talking about poetry and how writing poetry is quite common in our minority language cultures. And the people in the audience, it was a university audience in Berlin, were really shocked because they said that like they would never write a poem for an event and read it in front of people. But amongst amongst Irish speakers, that wouldn't be very unusual. I don't know how it would be where you are.
Yeah, I guess maybe it's somebody's eulogy. It would be appropriate here, or more common here. But even then, most of the time, people are reading, psalms, poems, not their own. It's usually, unless you're already like a published poet, people wouldn't assume that you would write something and share it ever.
Yeah.
At least here. So I think that's actually really impressive that people are willing to do that on a regular basis. And I always thought, when I was watching some videos and things from around Ireland, people doing the sean-nós singing or sean-nós dancing, just regular people, not necessarily performers, just going and doing this in a community area or with friends. It's very different. Yeah.
Yeah, and I don't want to overstate the poetry thing because I definitely am disproportionately surrounded by people who are interested in poetry. But there definitely is a higher proportion of people who will be willing to do that. And then there are a higher proportion of people who would publish poetry. Especially as they get older, I think people might get more interested. But as you said, yeah, definitely that's another thing that we take for granted is the music, and like everyone has a song. And where I go, there's a club in Dublin called Club Chonra na Gaeilge. It's like the bar of the Chonra na Gaeilge branch on Harcourt Street. And And whenever we go there, it's like a members bar downstairs. But anyone is welcome. Tá fáilte rih chach. Agus bí mid a caint as Gaeilge agus icona. So the night inevitably turns into a sing-song, and everybody sings. And it's wonderful because before I would have always been kind of afraid to sing because I would leave it to like the people who are really good at sean-nós. But after going to the Conrad enough times, I've kind of learned like, oh no, everyone's allowed to sing. You know, everyone can just like rip out their party piece. So that's really nice.
That's awesome. Yeah, there seems to be, at least here, an underappreciation of poetry, or this misunderstanding, probably from the way it's taught around here, is that, you know, that it's hard. That it's hard to understand, hard to write. And certainly the like more, I guess, skilled poems are harder to write and take a lot more effort. But a lot of people just think it's inaccessible for some reason. And even in the schooling that I had, it seemed very inaccessible in a lot of ways. When they brought it to us, it was in a way where, you know, it was this thing that the teacher had to completely break down and explain, otherwise you wouldn't get it. But that's not true. And a lot of people just don't try because of that, or don't read enough of it because of that. So it's underappreciated over here. Definitely.
There's probably similar thoughts over here held by a lot of people. And it depends on the poet, and it depends on the poem, and, you know, the occasion. So I won't make it out like we're all, you know, milling through these large volumes of poetry, but I do hope there's national appreciation for it.
Yeah. So that brings us into the spoken word poetry, which hopefully I can pronounce everything right. Sometimes my pronunciation is a little off, but Gaeltacht Veil.
Anawa? Yeah.
But yeah, so what's how's that different from, I guess, the traditional view that maybe Americans or other people might have of poetry?
So spoken word poetry, it's really broad as far as I understand it, and there is kind of this division between page poets, which would be the traditional poets you were describing, and then stage poets, in which the performance is part of the poem. And when I started writing properly and performing, that was around 2015, and I realized that I liked performing my poems and I liked writing them for performance. So for me, it was just kind of a personal choice, and I think it's because I just secretly love being on stage. Or maybe I'm a control freak and I just want like the poem to be, even the delivery of the poem, I want to be part of that, you know. Whereas if you leave it up to someone to read, it's a different experience.
Yeah, that's very true. They construct it more themselves, and they don't have the like tone and inflection that they would have if the author were to read it.
Yeah. So it's just a different, like some people say there shouldn't be a division, but for me, I definitely feel like I like performing my poems, and I write them knowing, oh, well, when I say this line, I'm going to be smiling, and when I say this one, I'm going to be making a face. So you kind of tell the audience or show them how to feel. So it would mean that I would have to change them a bit if they were just going to be on the page. But yeah, I just got such an interest in spoken word poetry, and it happened around the same time that a young poet, Seamus Barrow O'Sullivan, had won the All-Ireland Slam, and he was performing all in Irish. So that gave me kind of the inspiration to write spoken word poetry in Irish.
Yeah, and I've seen some of your spoken word videos on your YouTube channel. So you have some of them recorded for RTE that you did, and those are really good. I like those a lot.
Good, me good.
So you also did another series on your YouTube videos, which was called What the Fuckle. So a little play on words there. But I thought that was a really neat series that you did to break down some of the main issues that people have learning Irish or getting started with learning Irish.
Míle buíochas. Yeah, like the whole genesis of this basically was can remember it clearly. I was in the car with my sister, and she said, like, you know, oh, Ciara, I really like you telling me about Irish. She's my older sister, so like because my younger brother, he has to listen to me telling him about Irish because he was younger, and I used to be like, listen, I'll teach you. But she had moved out of the house by the time I'd gotten to that level. So now when I have the opportunity to share some of my knowledge, and you know, she finds it really interesting, and she said, why don't you share that online? And I hadn't actually gotten, I suppose I just didn't have the confidence to do that. And then 2017, I just said, you know what, I actually would really, because it's kind of like what you were saying about writing the book that you want to read. I wanted to make these videos because me, a few years beforehand, would have really benefited from them. So I kind of thought about, well, what about someone who's learning Irish now? You could help them by just sharing some of your information. So it's not only kind of things about the language, because you can obviously find them in grammar books, but it's kind of also these things on the fringes. So like, what's the Irish, like, how do we write when we're texting, or like what's words used in slang, or like this kind of hidden knowledge. So that's what I hope to do with What the Fuckle.
Yeah, definitely. I think one of the videos you did was actually helpful for me, even though the subject matter is still something that I struggle with a little bit, which was the Irish slender R.
Oh, yeah.
So, yeah. So the slender R sound. Yeah, I think it's fairly common. It's not an easy sound to do or remember to do sometimes. So yeah.
Yeah. And even in Ireland, like, I was brought up with teachers who didn't, we're not taught phonetics or like the how to pronounce the language very well. So, you know, if your initial interactions with the language are not using that, or you have to go back into like the very foundation of how you speak the language and then put in the slender letter. And so it can be difficult. And then like I still find myself saying things because they're just stuck in my brain incorrectly. So yeah, I hope that video helps people at least understand that it's there, and then you can start to recognize it, and then moving forward you can slowly like slip it into your conversation.
Yeah, definitely. And the way I had it explained to me was that it was kind of like a almost like a soft Z sound almost, which is like an RZ sound, which makes sense since it ends up on the end of a lot of plural words. So that makes sense that you would have kind of a like a RZ or RS sound there at the end. Kind of makes sense to it from an English perspective. It kind of makes sense. But yeah, it's not an easy sound to remember how to do.
No.
So,
but whatever helps you remember.
Oh, sorry. We're having a little bit of a delay here. So, but what's something you'd like to see with Gaeilge for the future? I like to ask this of pretty much everybody just to see what their take on it is, because everybody has their own focus for what they use Gaelic for.
I want to see Gaeilge everywhere. So what I really appreciate on a day-to-day, especially now that I've been in lockdown, because I wasn't on lockdown with Irish speakers. So my entire contact was through television, radio, social media, and everything being available in Irish makes a huge difference because it makes me be able to live my life in Irish, and that's what I want. So yeah, technology, because it's such a huge part of our lives now, for me, I just love to see everything in good Irish, because I think a few, like Gmail has been translated, and that's fantastic. And then some things like Facebook start to be translated, and now it's not, and it's patchy. And yeah, there's different stages that technology is on. But I do hope with Gaeilge and a lot of other minorities in the future, minority languages or minoritized languages, that in the future they will be more prevalent on all technology.
Yeah, I've actually bugged Twitter a little bit because Twitter has the option to change into different languages, but they don't have the option to change into Gaeilge. So I was bugging them a little bit, but I didn't get a response from the Twitter people. But maybe if enough people bug them, they'll try.
Yeah, I have mine in Gaeilge.
Oh, yours is?
Wait, how do I share it with? Yeah, wait, I'll screen. Let's see. Okay, application window. How do I get this in? Anyway, there it is.
So all of your settings and everything are Ask Gaeilge?
Tá sé masca. So some of the things you see there, it's Balia, Feachart, Vogri, Tachter. I think it's a beta version, but I'm not sure exactly. So then over there it says what's happening over there. So Neelisagum. When this call is finished, we'll sort you out.
Oh, awesome. But yeah, because I bugged them a little bit because I tried a couple times. So maybe if it's a beta, like you say, maybe they're starting to. So that would be really awesome. So yeah, having what you mentioned, one thing that I wanted to just reiterate on, you mentioned you wanted to live your life as Gaeilge or through Gaeilge. So that being a language like any other, and also an official language of Ireland, a lot of people struggle to live their life as Gaeilge because of different things. But having the option to do so is largely dependent on creative people putting out content and interacting as Gaeilge anyway. And I think that's growing. I think that's growing a lot.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's interesting actually. Like I think I don't have too much of a problem with my I there's musicians like when I was thinking about what else do I want in Irish, like there is this amazing rap duo Kneecap, and they rap in Irish, and like to see something like that which is so organic and to see it being like so in demand by such a range of people is just really fantastic. And that's what you want to see. Like I know I said technology and that's really boring, but really what I want to see is like music festivals and like exciting things happening in the language just by themselves in a beautiful organic fashion. And then when it comes to services that the government should be providing through Irish, that's like severely lacking. And you're basically every single time you want a service, you have to like literally ring up and say, beep, I want Irish. And then 9 times out of 10, you get put through to someone who answers the phone in English and you say, oh, vi me giri, machud gno of trí Gaeilge. And they say, sorry, the guy who speaks Irish is on holidays for the next 3 weeks. So do you want to do it now in English or not do it at all? Or like, it's this kind of, and they kind of, you really do feel that you are this annoyance for wanting to do your business in Irish. But on the other hand, if you do it in English, you're not contributing to the statistics that show that people want the services in Irish. So there's such a misconception that because Irish is the first official language of the state, that the state in any way supports the language. I think all of the best things that have happened with Irish in the last 20 years have been largely just out of people being wonderful and not the state.
Yeah, that definitely makes me think of the guys with pop-up Gaeltacht.
Oscar and Peter, yeah.
And just throwing it together on their own and making it happen outside of the strictures of a school and the strictures of the government, and just letting it happen organically and getting people together to practice whatever Irish they have.
Yeah. It's like, and another thing that I love, it's already started happening and I'd love to see more of it, is just breaking up any of those stereotypes associating Irish with backwardness and Irish with Catholicism and Irish with, anything. Irish is a language and you can do every single thing you want through that language. And I just love seeing all the creative things that people are doing. one project that I'm involved with an arts collective called Gaeltacht. So it means like gay, queer, Irish. But essentially, we've been running Pride events for the last like 4 or 5 years. And then this year we officially formed an arts collective. So it's just loads of queer, LGBT plus Gaeilge who make loads of different types of art. So we have dancers and singers and actors and writers. And yeah, everybody kind of contributes. We hope to put on sort of cabaret shows, but we haven't had a chance because it's been locked down. So we've made some cabaret videos.
Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, that sounds great. And it sounds like there's more and more coming out with people through Gaeilge, and like the stuff you've started up, and then the pop-up Gaeltacht. And I keep hearing more bits and pieces, and I'm sure over on my side of the pond, I'm probably picking up things a little later than a lot of people. But I've been trying to keep up with it, reading stuff on Nos and a couple other places that help keep up with it a little bit too. So, but yeah, so where can people find your content or find you online? So where are those places at?
You can't even move online and you'll find me by accident. I am on every site. So my name is Misha Ciara, Misecia or A. So in America, you would think it is like Miss Sierra. That's what she said. Is it Miss and then an E and then Sierra? And I was like, yes. And then when I have to set out my email when I lived in America. But yeah, so I'm Misha Ciara on Twitter and SoundCloud and on YouTube itself, and on Facebook. And I just set up a Patreon today, actually. So
cool.
That's really exciting. Some people have been asking me on Twitter, actually, oh, do you have a Patreon or a PayPal? So I didn't have one. I don't know why. I think I just felt embarrassed about having one. I don't know if that's a really Irish thing.
Yeah, I know how that feels too.
Yeah, nobody likes asking for money. But I suppose like then it's like you don't even have to ask. Sometimes it's just good to say, if you enjoyed this video, you could contribute if you wanted to. So I have that set up. So yeah, you can find me on a lot of different channels, and I love hearing from people. I love hearing ideas for new videos if you have any requests. And yeah, just hearing how you get on. An amazing thing happened last week when a man in Colombia uploaded a video of him speaking Irish. He'd been learning for 4 years. Yeah, it's on YouTube if you look up polyglot and Irish. And then he actually, sorry, I didn't comment. I looked at the description first, and he had linked my channel. So then I commented, and I was like, you watch my videos? This is amazing. Yeah, so I love connecting with people.
That's great. One of the stories I like to tell people, at least here, when they don't realize how much Irish has spread around the globe, just from people really picking up the language and just really loving it and learning it. That way, not necessarily that they all came from Ireland. They may be completely not Irish, but they just fell in love with the language and wanted to learn it. So one of those stories is that one of my Facebook friends, who was in Ireland, I don't think he has a Facebook anymore. But when I used to follow him, he posted about his trip to Jamaica. And so if he watches this video, maybe he'll let me know where he is now. But he went to Jamaica and was wearing a shirt that had writing Gaeilge. And a guy in Jamaica, a Jamaican guy, came up to him and started speaking to him Gaeilge, and he was just blown away. And yeah, so I try to tell that to people around here so that they realize that it's everywhere, and you might not realize it until you start wearing something that might have some Gaeilge on it or something like that. So yeah.
Oh my God, it's adoration. Yeah, I love finding Irish speakers around the world. And like I met an Irish speaker when I was in Miami. We connected through Gaeilge One. And yeah, my friend Sean McIntonig, he has a great YouTube as well. He has traveled a lot around the world, and he always seems to find an Irish speaker wherever he goes. So it's a great way of connecting with someone who you know in a way will have a similar interest. And usually, you know, it's good to meet up because you both want to speak Irish, and then you both get to have a lovely evening. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's a very close knit community of Gaeltacht, and in a lot of ways, but they're very spread out. So like, yeah, you can find them almost anywhere, and that's really great. And a lot of people don't know that. One podcast I listened to, we were able to find out that there were, some Gaeltacht in Australia, some in South America, some in, South Africa, and all over the place. So it was really, really cool. Yeah. So, so that's all we have right now. So I'll go ahead and close this out. But thanks everyone for watching, and thank you, Ciara, for being on with us. It's been really great having you. And hopefully we'll be able to interact at some later date as well. So these interviews are never one-off. You know, anybody can pop back on whenever they want. If there's something new to talk about, we'll find it. But again, all the links are in the description below for videos and resources that Ciara has been involved in. And so you can click those and check those out. So Gurav Mil Mahkit, Ciara, for being with us.
Cheryl.
And we'll see everyone in the next video.
Slán.
Slán.